your role in Oman?
Mohammed Al Hashmi from Oman. I work for Royal Horse Racing Club. I'm a racing director for the Royal Horse Racing Club and as well as a steward.
And so closely involved with the regulatory side and to complete the veterinary sciences side of it. We heard from Dr. Stefano a little earlier on. Your practice is based in the Middle East currently, but there is expansion.
Yeah, well, I'm Italian, living in Abu Dhabi since the last 15 years, and actually working as a head veterinarian for a company that is providing, call it Epicare. We provide veterinary services to the horse industry. We are actually based in UAE and serving some Gulf countries, but there is a plan to expand this to Europe as well in the next future.
Oh, well, good luck with the expansion, and a couple of topics that you'll be very useful for a little bit later on. I think we might revisit some old ground as the afternoon progresses. Hisham, first of all, thank you again for your hospitality last year when we were in Morocco. We were all treated to the opening day, racing on the opening day at the new racecourse in Marrakesh that Xavier mentioned earlier on. How is it going? How is the racecourse flourishing? How's the first year been?
Alors, effectivement,
the truth is that we have an exceptional situation for us owners, and we have had the pleasure of welcoming this World Festival. It's a great honor for all of us. And this year has been the second edition of such an important festival in Marrakesh that took place last week. It was a big success, and we do hope in Marrakesh we'll have the pleasure of welcoming the same World Festival and also in the field of this type of Arabic horses. Thank you.
And it was a great experience there. Terrific facilities at the racecourse, and we wish you well with it in the future. Just to pick up on some of the topics that have been discussed earlier on, which were regulatory. But before we do that, in thanking His Highness Sheikh Mansoor and Sheikh Fatima, and now Sheikh Latifa, who adds her name to the very important and innovative pony racing series, which we're all thoroughly looking forward to seeing it grow and continue. And the best bit will be when we have one of the jockeys riding in the apprentice race who has started in the pony races. That's what we can look forward to see that come. But I'd remind you that 12 months ago when we were in Morocco, it was this very session, the rules and regulations session, that stimulated actually a rule change. And it was a question that came from the floor relating to horses running on Lasix and Sheikh Mansour festival races. And I think that is surely a resounding endorsement of the power of this forum and a demonstration that we do have the ability in this room to change things for the better and to move the sport on. So if I can ask you to bear that in mind when you're thinking about your questions for these people, because last year we did in fact effect a rule change. Stefano, just picking up on the hot topic of this morning, and I know you commented on it at the time on embryo transfer. I don't want to get too much into the detail about it from a veterinary point of view, but from a regulatory point of view, Val Bunting particularly was talking about not being totally against it, but as long as it's regulated. Like a lot of things in racing, it does seem that it is regulated. The difficulty is that the regulations are different in each country. As far as the horses are concerned, in different territories, would regulation work? Would it make a difference? We were hearing this morning, we'll come to talk about Oman in a minute, that the climate for the horses is different. Would regulation of embryo transfer be affected by things like that, by geolocation?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just a matter I think it's going to be impossible to find a unique way to deal with this problem, so, but technically embryo transfer can be applied all over the world. I mean, so it's done already, and it's quite successful. It's a matter of, I don't want to get into this. I mean, from the scientific point of view, I say it's something possible. We are doing that. Many people are successful. I leave the rest to the other people. I mean, I don't want to get involved, in a big, long discussion about this.
No, true and understandable. If the people who are controlling the sound, if we could just have Stefano's microphone up a little bit so that we can hear a little bit better. Mohammed, we were talking earlier, just very briefly, before we started, about your role in the regulatory process. You've been involved in creating the rule book for Oman. Where do you start with something like that? I mean, are you looking at other countries and taking your influences from there? Are you looking at other countries' mistakes and saying, well, we don't want to do it the way they do it, we'll create a better way? Where do you start with the rule book?
First of all, I think always we really need to thank Sheikh Mansoor, first of all, for gathering all of us in one roof, talking and exchanging the experiences. Thank you, Lara, for, bringing all these people under one roof. It's not an easy job, but congratulations, you're always doing it. Going back to your question regarding the rules and regulations, as what everybody knows that Oman, starting official races where there's a handicap, there is an official, official races. It's only, we're going back only 15 years. So it's not a long time. So, we started, I spoke about this before, but this is what I will say. The last thing which is I want to say is, from all what I said before from different sessions, that, making rules and writing rules to suit the country by itself. Like each country are different. Everybody was talking about it this morning in earlier sessions. How, as a regulator, to write the rules or to put the rules where it suits the country by itself. The basic is always the same all other countries, but, coming up with the rules which will suit and, makes, to say that make everybody happy, from the trainer, from the owner, jockeys, and, as a regulator, you have to be very friendly. So anyway, it took us a long time, especially me. I've worked almost for 4 years, reading all the rules books all around the authorities around the world. I've visited some of the clubs. For now, I would like to say thank you very much for United Emirates. They were a big support for me to write these rules in Oman and apply it in Oman. Really, thank you very much. And I would like to thank all other countries who really helped me, but it took us 4 years to write these rules. And right now, I could say that I think, as what I said, you need to make both sides happy, and I think everybody's happy now in Oman in our new rules.
The Omani rules are very happy. Everybody's very happy with them, and they took their lead from the UAE. That's something that you will have had a great deal of involvement in, Neil. The development of rules as racing has grown in the UAE, has it been difficult to keep up with the trends, the international horses coming in, seeing more people from different countries who are coming in used to different rules? Has that caused a problem from a regulatory point of view?
I think technology has been a huge help in that department because, let's say 20, 25 years ago, you didn't know what the rule book looked like in any country except the one you were in. Mm-hmm. Well, now you can look up any rule book anywhere in the world. So if you decide you're Bob Baffert in California and you want to run in Dubai, he can just go online to the ERA website and he can download the rule book. He knows where he is. These days we have email. We can email jurisdictions and say, hey, this is what we do in our backyard. what do I do with my horse when he comes here? Can we run on this? Can we use that? What's the drawdown? So technology's really made that a lot easier.
Yeah, it's a fascinating point because it's now available to everybody wherever in the world, and presumably for owners and trainers planning campaigns, that would be a great deal of use to them. And of course, it takes the onus off the regulatory authority to make everybody aware of the rules, because the rules are there for everybody to go and search. Does that lessen the importance of the regulator, or does it mean that you've got time to concentrate on other things without having to send rule books out to every single country?
Well, it certainly helps, but at the same time, it's easier for each jurisdiction to be aware and be up to date with what other countries and other continents are doing. Because rules and regulations it's an organic thing. It changes and grows and moves. Things that weren't in a rule book 20 years ago are now very important.
Sure.
Things, especially in the world of medicine, things like cobalt. No one thought about cobalt 20 years ago, and now it's all over the newspapers. So, as I said, it's an organic thing, and it grows and changes, and you have to adapt to it. So, again, the technology really helps, because if somebody has a problem somewhere in the world, we know about it the next morning. And if we think it's going to be a problem in our jurisdiction, well, then our people then get involved immediately and say, okay, we need to look at this because we don't have it covered.
Joya, rules change organically and they adapt to their environment. Laws change less frequently, and you presumably have to look at these rule books that are created by various different countries and take those a stage further and see how they would stand up to the legal process rather than horse racing's regulatory process. What are the challenges involved in that?
Well, the challenge is, as you rightly pointed out, the legal system doesn't change as quickly as the regulation changes, because the regulations, I would add to what Neil just said, it's not only organically, it's in continuous development and evolution. The regulations are always evolving, but the legal system does not always keep pace with it. Now, it's very important to establish a system where the legal system and the legal, if you like, framework keeps on the pace with the rapidly changing environment of the horse racing and racing authorities and so on and so forth. Because you don't want to reach a solution where you have a regulation which is advanced and you don't have the legal text or the legal infrastructure up to date with it, because you will reach a situation where, for example, if under the regulation you're applying a sanction, and you need that sanction to be appealed, for instance. And if you don't have the legal text that supports the appeal, then you're in a deadlock. And that deadlock is neither good for trainers, nor good for breeders, nor good for jockeys. And we need to have the legal systems and the regulations need to go and work and go hand in hand. And this is the role of, if you like, forums like this, regulatory authorities. I believe in more or less a unanimous system where you have one basic laws and one basic principles that should apply to almost everybody. And when you have it like this, you will avoid situations where the regulations will be higher in terms of standards than the legal system.
That's an interesting point, and we will come back to that, because there's a point that I know Mohammed wants to make in a moment or two. And Marcel, I'll come to you in just a second, but while you've got the floor, just one of the things that we discussed very briefly before we sat down was the right of appeal. And we saw in the world's richest Arabian horse race last year, there was a steward's inquiry. We had the result of the steward's inquiry, and there was an appeal, and it was a long drawn out appeal. It was sorted and satisfied by the racing authorities. But can that appeal process go higher?
It's for me or for myself?
For you.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, if we talk about that particular race that you were talking about, the regulations within that racing authorities does not allow you to take that appeal higher. And in my opinion, as a legal person, it's inconceivable for you to have a system where the punisher and the judge is within the same organization. No matter how you package it, no matter how you bring it to show that you have an independent appeal system, it cannot happen. The appeal body should be totally independent from the racing authorities. Because in this case, you will be giving the person or whatever, the jockey or the trainer or whomever is involved in that particular proceeding, you will giving those people the right to go to a totally independent party and to plead their case. I mean, if you look at the FEI gives you the right to appeal. Any race that is under FEI regulations, you have an appeal within the FEI tribunal, but then if the FEI tribunal's decision, you find yourself grieved with it, you have the right to appeal further to the Court of Arbitration for Sports. And with this, you would be granting everybody equal chance and better, if you like, better solutions for justice. Because we know that normal justice is based on 3 levels. You have the first instance, the appeal, and you have the higher courts. So if you limit in your regulation for only the first instance and the appeal, which also the appeal is a question mark because it's within the same organization, then you're not granting equal justice to everybody. And when you have justice, you have investments.
And the Court of Arbitration for Sport, you set that up in Abu Dhabi?
Yes, I had a major role in opening the branch of the Court of Arbitration for Sports in Abu Dhabi. So the infrastructure is there, the body is there, so we should use it. And further, also, I would also like to add that since last year, there's been a law published in the UAE, which also I contributed in drafting, is the UAE Sports Arbitration Law. And according to that law, the UAE will have its own sports arbitration court. So it is still in the process of getting the logistics around it, but once that is there, we can also use that body if we want to open an independent or to give an independent chance to the people who are within the industry for a higher level of justice.
Neil, would you have a view on that? I mean, it sounds very much as though we're taking the decisions out of the steward's room and into the courtroom. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it good that there is a higher level to go to than the stewards and the racing authorities?
Well, the background, my steward's background was in North America, and we would have a decision made by the stewards regarding a situation. And if it was appealed to the commission. The commission were different people. They weren't stewards. They worked for the Racing Commission. They were learned people who were tasked with that job of reviewing the facts, reviewing the ruling, and then listening to subsequent information that might be available. So that took the pressure off of the stewards themselves because they didn't have to justify again. In other words, retry the same case. They gave it over, and the commission would make a ruling.
Which is closer to what you were saying, Jereya, about you can't have the accused and in the same part of the same organization.
It puts the independence, whether we like it or not, it puts the criteria of independence into question. And that's why if you look at most of the international federations, any sports, they always give the rights for, they have their own appeal bodies within their own framework, and they give the right also further when you exhaust all your internal, if you like, ways for your appeal or challenges, you still will have the right to go to a higher authority.
Marcel, would you have a view on that as to whether that's necessary in your country to have somewhere further to go, or is it that the rules and regulations and the rule book as you have created it and live by, is that robust enough on its own to satisfy every situation?
I think it's robust enough, but we also have the three-level decisions. So first of all, when there is a steward's decision, you can appeal against it, and that comes before the commission in the federation, in the Gallop Federation. That's the second level. And when the trainer or the owner do not agree with that decision, they can even go before a civil court. So in fact, that's the three-level.
There is a higher authority. Ian, have you come across in your travels and your various roles around the world differences in that where there is a possibility for appeal and to a higher level or not?
Over time, most people think and realise that independent appeal is the way to go. The reality is that it's difficult to find suitable legal people who have a real understanding of the complexity of racing to make judgments that are suitable for racing. Now, some can, the majority can't. That's very difficult. They make decisions which in some ways are unacceptable to the racing community because it's completely different to the way we think.
Yeah, very interesting point. How do you stand on that, Jorge? Because the people who are making the judgments in the legal framework, Ian was saying, are not necessarily expert in the field of horse racing.
Well, I tend to disagree with that because if I want to talk about the Court of Arbitration for Sports,
yes,
you have people who have
about the Court of. I was talking generally. If that were to be adopted in other racing territories or in racing countries where it is possible to take it to a higher level to appeal. In the Court of Arbitration in Abu Dhabi, you would have experts, but is there a danger that in some places, if you don't have the people who are expert and fluent in the subject, you might not get the proper justice?
I agree, but then the need. When you have a need, the means you'll create the means for it. So then you'll be training people for that, and you'll be raising people to a better level of understanding and knowledge for that. And these forums are perfect for it.
There are some good jobs for former stewards out there as legal advisors, perhaps. In Morocco, your rules and regulations, how does your appeal process work if a decision is made and it's not agreed with? How does that appeal system work?
Oui. Alors, avant de répondre à votre question,
to answer into this question, considering the debate and the quality of the debates this morning and during this afternoon, I'd like to talk about the goals, objectives of rules and regulations. I think that the objective of the rules and regulations are two. First of all, it is to be able to have the possibility of opening the door to all Arabian horses everywhere to participate at those racing activities. And on the other hand, the most important and responsibility is that as the authority, we should work for that. And this is why we have the IFAR, this is why we have the authorities, worldwide and international authorities. It is important, very important to standardize, to have rules and regulations, not only the type of pur sang Arabe, the type of thoroughbred, this type of pure blood Arabian horses, but the rules are the same for the English and the Arabian pure blood horses. But of course there are differences regarding embryo transfers. All countries are not at the same speed. There are countries that are very developed countries, and there are other countries that should be given help and go with them. And this is why IFAR, and this is why we have this important festival to try to communicate and to work together. It is very important to make it clear, to understand that authorities are there to help them, to help the owners, to help the people. And authorities should have a debate among themselves, and IFAR should have a debate with other international authorities concerning the pure-blood British or English horses and horsing authorities. So the owners and breeders, in the case of the Arabian horses, are not always visible. They are not given a word to say. So, and we're not having the possibility of investing more money if we're not visible. Regarding your second question, it is very important. In Morocco, of course, we are very close to Europe. So, and we have the same characteristics. We have the same rules, same regulations as Europe. We have the same rules and regulations, and we want people from Arabian countries and from European countries to come to our country to participate in those activities. That's a rule. That's what we would like to have. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Pick up on a couple of very interesting points you made there about IFAR, of course, and the tremendous work that IFAR does in bringing these rules together. The point that Richard Lancaster made earlier on is that if countries don't sign up to the international agreements, then that is a difficulty, and maybe that's something we can touch on later. Another word you used was standardization. Well, that's how it was translated to me. Standardization. And I just wanted to bring that back to something that Mohammed was saying earlier about you should build your rules and regulations specific to your country that suit your country and your horses and your participants, your owners and trainers. But surely there are some rules that can be standardized, and the one that springs to mind, that usually immediately springs to mind, is the whip rule. And there are two issues associated with the whip. There is horse welfare, and I think in the racing community we're all quite satisfied these days that it is that the whip rules are not a welfare issue, because the regulations have changed, the way whips are made has changed, the frequency which they can use has been changed, and that is for the welfare of the horse. But there is also a perception issue of people who may not be fully supportive of horse racing, who see that as being a negative reflection on the sport. And I was talking to Sophie briefly last night, and just in terms of the jockeys having different rules in different countries, that makes it difficult for them, because it's drilled into them, it's six, and then you go to another country and it's 7, or it's 5, or it's less. From a horse welfare point of view, Stefano, there is no issue.
No, I think we are far from talking about the horse abuse when using a whip. I mean, maybe Xavier and Richard can say something more, but the whip is more an encouragement, the way it's used in the material. Like you say, something different. I mean, we are very far from horse abuse. It's just a way to encourage the horse or to wake him up. You know, from there to mistreating the horse or giving him an injury with the use of the whip, I mean, it's a long, long way. I understand that from the public's point of view, and some, you know, now animalists and whatever, everybody's watching carefully, but from the scientific and veterinary point of view, I never seen a horse injured by the use of the whip.
So in that case, it is possible, and we'll ask each of the panelists to give their view on it. In that case, because there is no welfare issue, it is possible to have the same whip rules in terms of how the whip can be used and the frequency with which it can be used. It should be possible to have the same rule the whole world over. And we'll ask each of the panel in turn for their views on that, because I know Ian's going to disagree with me when we get to the bottom. But do you have a view on that? What is the rule in Oman, by the way, about use of the whip? How many times the jockey can use? Do we know that rule?
In Oman, as what I told you, that we started where the others are in the ruling and regulations. Yes, it's very important, but I think saying that the rules or the regulations in all worldwide can be the same, I think is a little bit difficult. It's not impossible, but it's difficult for now. In Oman, we've written the rules which we've put. We always balance between as what I told you, the environment and who you're dealing with. You always to apply something. I believe you always apply step by step to educate and to let the jockeys or the trainer or everybody to understand the rules, rather than coming in one go and then say, okay, this is black or white. So that's how I started in Oman, and this is right now where we've reached. I think it's a basic the standard of the whip, like a whip. Some countries, they say, no, you're allowed only 7, but you're allowed after 200 meters on the straight line, and then you're not allowed this or you're not allowed that. But I think the standard is from 10 to 12 whip.
But that one hit difference can mean to a jockey a suspension or not a suspension. Neil, can we standardise whip rules?
It's difficult because jurisdictions around the world are very different. I mean, it's like asking how long is a piece of string. In every country, the way they look at the stick is very different. In North America, the rules are quite a bit different in terms of the way they phrase things, giving a horse a chance to respond. In some countries, they have set numbers, as you said. I think it will be a big challenge to get everybody to sit down at the table and say, okay, 6. I just can't see it happening.
But, Joreya, that is, in legal terms, it's 5 is 5 and that's it, or 6 or whatever. Surely it would be easier, and particularly in terms of those appeals that would never reach you because there is a finite number.
Well, I agree with the word that you just mentioned earlier, standardization. The more you standardize, the less you have problems and differences between regulations and between countries. If we speak commercially, the most successful commerces are the ones that have the standard operation rules that applies everywhere. If you go to McDonald's, I don't want to give the names. If you go to a shop somewhere and you go to another country to the same shop, you have the same service. And if we can apply the same for any rule, you would reduce as much as you can the differences and the problematics. So if we have a standard rules, if from a veterinary point of view, as Stefano just mentioned, there's no risk of injury for the horse, so the welfare of the horse is not at stake. So why not set a unified rule for the whips? And then whether the jockey is running in X country or Y country or Z country, he knows that he can whip that much and that's it. I'm a strong believer in standardizing rules and regulations.
The racing authorities say it will be difficult. Would it have an effect in Belgium, Marcel? Would it be difficult to apply?
About standardization, I agree completely with my friend here. So, in a rules point of view, there is nothing that looks like a flat horse race than another flat horse race. So, I think that we should standardize as much as possible, but it will not be easy, because in the thoroughbred world, we are racing about for more than 200 years, and we still have not the same rules. Even these little small detail as the use of the whip is not the same in Germany, Belgium, France, and so on. So I think that we should do an effort to standardize as much as possible, and it helps also the jockeys, the trainers, and so on. It's not only for the stewards.
In that case, Arabian racing has an opportunity to lead there, perhaps, and set an example to the thoroughbreds, and maybe that is some influence that Sheikh Mansour Festival could maybe have in its races in the future, perhaps something to think about. Ian, I said to start with, there are two issues: horse welfare, which is sorry, Marcel.
Just in Belgium, the Arab races are raced under the rules of the Belgian Federation. So same rules for the thoroughbreds and for the Arab horses.
Same rules for the thoroughbreds and the Arabs. Stefano's told us that horse welfare is a non-issue. The other issue then is perception and of people. None of us would like to think that we ever saw abuse of any kind on a racecourse, but in some territories it is different, and the people who are watching the racing want to see a jockey giving more encouragement, perhaps more encouragement than we would like to see.
And that's what basically makes standardisation impossible. If you go to anywhere in Asia where the gambling aspect is paramount, they don't just want the whip, they expect the whip. And if they don't see it, they won't accept it. Now standardisation's a wonderful thing, but the reality is it just won't happen. And like Chris is the chairman of stewards in Greece, and his riders regularly ride with us and our regularly riders with him. But their attitude in Greece is completely different to the attitude in Cyprus. And the jockeys know, and they make the arrangements wherever they are. There's a lot of restriction going on. Maybe it's because of public pressure in some circumstances. In a lot of countries, there's zero public pressure.
So that standardisation, Jorge, would be difficult because of the way in which the sport is viewed in different countries. Could the laws be adapted, but the laws have to be applied black and white, surely?
Yeah, the laws have to be applied black and white. I didn't say standardization is something easy. I said standardization is the ideal situation. So if we can reach 70% or 80% of the ideal situation, we can reduce as much as possible the problematic issues. Now, whether one thing is conceived in a country in a way different than the other, again, we cannot wake up tomorrow morning and say we're standardizing. It's a process, it's a journey, but we need to start that journey.
Well, interesting you should say that, because there's a leading owner in the UK, Paul Jacob, who owns an international thoroughbred, Lamato, and he has publicly called for a trial, and I suppose a trial would be difficult to effect because you've taught jockeys one way and now you're asking them to try it differently for a different way for 6 months and then maybe go back to how they were. But it would be a start. It would be a start on that journey. Is that a journey that racing authorities could embark on, Neil?
If I was asked to give my advice, I would say yes.
Neil, do you think there is merit in further discussion between the racing authorities?
From my perspective, I would think that the composition of the stick will be easier to get an agreement on than getting into the actual technique of the rider. Because if we can make this, a lot of the whips now are very humane compared to the ones 20 years ago. Yeah. When you could cut a horse. I think if we can get the stick down to being standardized, that would be a good start.
We'll ask the panel, is there a rule or a regulation currently in racing that you would like to, we've discussed the whip and how difficult that would be to achieve standardization, but it would be the ideal. Is there a rule or regulation in racing that you would like to see standardized or closer, to reach closer to standardization?
Alors, moi je dirais...
I would say that no matter the number of whips that may change from one country to the next, from 6 to 12, we have this principle of when and how using the crop. When a jockey uses his crop 1,000 meters from the arriving line, it's a problem. When he uses it in the last 200 or 300 meters from the finish line, you may understand it. But the use of crop is different with 2-year racehorse or a 4 or 5 years racehorse with more experience. And generally speaking, stewards internationally are careful with that. You do not beat a 2-year-old or beat or use your whip on a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old. And you may even change the type of crop. And that is how you can start standardizing the principles on the use of crop. But maybe in England they are at 6 whips, and in Morocco we are at 10, but we may want to maybe get a little bit closer. Oui, c'est très intéressant.
I think that if we can look at ways possibly where we can get closer and closer, then the difference becomes eventually very small and maybe closer to standardization. I just wanted to take the panel's view on another subject that was touched on earlier, and you reminded me of it there, about the age at which Arabians run, the age at which they start. And I would be very interested in your view, Stefano, and all the panel, because I think there are a wide range of views out there, and I just wonder how that is reflected on the panel. What was your view on that, Stefano, about when Arabians should start to run?
I'm personally a fan of early time of exercise for the horses. We shouldn't forget that race horses are athletes, and sport is changing in every discipline, including the horses. We are getting precocious and precocious and precocious. Many reasons: business, marketing, visibility, whatever. And also from the scientific point of view, it's proven. If a horse starts exercising early stage, the consolidation of metabolism, musculoskeletal system is much faster and long-lasting than a horse starting late. Then you got a lot of points, like Damien de Vaticant was saying before. You can have horses that show precocity, horses that are late maturing, whatever. This is up to the trainer. And we also need to keep in mind that one very important point in all of this is how the horse is raised, what he gets during the time he grow up stage by stage, and how he reach the trainer. But scientifically it's proven that an early exercise helps the horse in his racing career. So for me, when we come to Arabians, I think that 3 years old is quite a fair way to start raising the horses.
3 years old would be a fair place to start. We'll take the views of each of the panel in just a moment, but I think Richard Mullen has got a microphone and has got a question for the panel. Richard.
Yeah, as far as standardization of the whip rule, it's never going to happen. In my opinion, and as Xavier, we were discussing here, it's a jockey's responsibility in each jurisdiction we go to know the rules, to know the whip rules. If you ride in Scandinavia, there is no whip rule. There's no whip. If you go to the UAE, the UK, the UK is 7, UAE is 11. If you go to Hong Kong, if you've hit one 20 times, you haven't hit it enough. So as far as standardizing it, the only thing that would be possible to do is actually standardize the whip itself, so that wherever in the world we have the same whip, in each country. But how do you expect the young riders to learn if all the rules are the same around the world? This is how they improve their riding in different jurisdictions, riding against different jockeys under different rules. This is how they improve themselves. And as far as the use of the whip, so many of the jockeys get suspensions for, and it'd be interesting in Ian's point of view here. You go 2 over, and you get, I don't know, from 1,000 fine to up to 5,000 to getting 2-day suspension, depending on the severity of the whip. For me personally, what I hate seeing is jockeys that are out of contention, hitting a horse 7 or 8 times, and it gets overlooked because they haven't actually broke the rule because they're still in the number. Whereas these should be punished more so for the horse that isn't actually willing to go than the ones that are winning a race that have probably exceeded it by 1 or 2. So I think these are things that stewards should look at now. The guys at the back that are using their whip for for no reason. It's just, it's a lazy of not pushing the horse. It's just pick up the stick and hit it. And it's a horrible thing to see. And that's public perception then looking at that is worse than a jockey going, hitting one 13 times and he should have hit it 10. And he's won the race. You know, hitting one that's out of the screen and the ambulance is overtaking it. This is bad for racing.
Very good point. Very good point. And Xavier.
Yeah, I would like to mention as well, the whip, it's an help. We're not supposed to whip horses for nothing, as Richard mentioned and Mr. Isham as well, because on the end of the day, we go to some countries and you ride babies, 3-year-old, first time out, and you're not allowed to have whips, like for example in Holland. But believe me, when you are on a horse, first time out, 3-year-old, and it's just a big baby and he just wants to play, and when you goes to the starting gate and he's backing, trying to take you out of the saddle, the whip is useful, not to punish him, just to make him go forward. And in some other case, we need the whips just sometimes to help us to turn. So it's not only to punish the horse or to make him go faster, it's an help for us as well. And as Richard mentioned, and as the panel mentioned, it's our responsibility to use the whip the number of times we have to, and the way we are doing. Because, as you mentioned earlier, if you use the whip 1,000 meters of the post for nothing, the jockey should be punished. But the jockey win the race and give one more than the maximum of whips should not be punished to me. And sometimes it's very tricky for us, especially if you have gambling and you have the rules of 7 whips. You give the 7 whips because you had to work your horse from the 1,000 meters of the post to go to win, not to finish behind. And then, so you have to put the stick down. What public will say, what people who put money on you will say.
Right, yeah.
So it's very tricky. You have to have rules, and I believe it'll be good to have an international rules of a number of whips, but we have to work and we have to be careful on the way we used it. Thank you.
Thank you, Xavier. Why I think that deserves a particular round of applause is because I'm here saying standardise it, don't confuse the jockeys, make it easy. And you've got 2 top jockeys standing up there who are saying, don't worry about it, guys. It's our responsibility, and it's up to us to know the rules, to know the rule book wherever we go. And what you were saying earlier about technology, Neil, that information is more easily accessible these days. Is there another? We have another question from the front here, sir.
I'm a steward in the racing. I also noticed, as in my experience in stewarding, the problem and issue is from the trainers, because some of the jockeys, they are, in the way using the whip, is coming the instructions from the trainer, because education of the trainer is very important. How do we give an instruction to the jockey? Because when we call jockeys in the steward rooms, and they have, using the whip in an abuse way, especially in the last 200 meters or 300 meters, to give chance to the owner to win. That is the problem from the trainers, because they're giving instruction to this jockey to push the horses and give more whip. Thus, we need education for trainers, how the way to use them, and also to educate new rules, to implement new rules internationally to have, similar to all the countries and all the nations. Thank you.
Education for trainers. Would anybody like to pick up on that?
Yeah, if I could say one thing. It's been a long time since I trained in America, but I think everyone here that holds a trainer's license or has owned a horse has had that one horse that didn't want to run if you didn't chase him. You can put the whip away, turn it for home, and you watch him back up like a taxi out of fuel. The riders will tell you that too. Some horses are stick horses. You don't have to punish them, but you chase them and to get the best out of them. And some horses will run on their own. Others you have to just encourage. And some you put the whip away out the back door.
You're out the back. There's another question from the audience. Nellie, hello.
I was happy to hear one person of the panel making the attention to the legal background to rules. And I think there is still lots of misunderstanding about this international agreement of IFAR. IFAR has no legal background, it's no rules. It's just proposals which are implemented in certain countries, and the international agreement was just to find out and to tabulate which countries apply which attitude. But this is no rules, because we cannot implement them.
Well, quite a contentious point, yes.
I'm not to comment on IFAR's rules to start with. However, I will answer your question in a more generic way. When there is an international federation that exists, and that international federation manages a certain sports, it's for the countries that are members to this federation to adhere to the rules and regulations. Now, the way the adherence of these rules and regulations happens, it can happen in different manners. It can happen into bilateral agreements, or it could happen by adhering to the status of the federation. Now, it depends on how the current federation is looking at those regulations. It all depends on the stand that this federation would like to take on how to apply its regulation. For example, if I give you another sports, if I give you football, for instance, FIFA regulations are set in hard stones. There are mandatory regulations that all members of FIFA should abide by, and FIFA will give the flexibility to each national association to adopt their own rules according to their location, to their culture, to their geography. It depends. But the mandatory rules that FIFA set forth are set in stone. No affiliated member can go against them. Now, to project this situation into, let's say, IFAR, okay, IFAR should also do the same. Now, I cannot comment on what is IFAR's status, because I'm not in a position to do that. I'm not entitled to do that. But if this is what you are looking for, which I agree with, this is how it should be.
I'm in IFAR from the start. And in the start, we all said, oh, we are going to make the international rules, and everyone has to obey the international rules. And we found out after something like 15 years now that it's not impossible. That's not possible.
No, it's not impossible.
So that's why I just draw the attention to the fact that the IFAR international agreement is only an agreement for some countries to adhere to some proposals. Don't call it rules. It's no rules.
Well, in IFRA, we have rules. We have set rules, and we apply the rules, and all members entities or country that are members in IFRA, they abide by these rules. So it's either our way in terms of IFRA rules, or it's the highway. Then when you are in the right forum of IFAR, you should recommend to IFAR's executive committee to set the rules in stone.
IFRA is new, and you were right to make rules in stones. Yeah. IFAR has to submit to the 200 years old quarrels in the jockey clubs, because in each of our countries we are subjected to the studbook, we're subjected to the WAHO, and we are subjected to the jockey club.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. If the rules are not enforceable, there's no longer rules.
It makes no sense. You cannot call them rules. That's it. Thank you for mentioning it in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelly. We have a question from Stephen Molyneux, the handicapper.
Yeah, it's more a comment made from my cousin, who is a racing enthusiast. He's not a racing professional. Regards the whip, he wonders why, when the rule is broken, that it's always the jockey that gets punished, he gets suspended, he gets fined a percentage of his winnings. Why is the horse never disqualified? The rules are broken, and yet, you're allowed to keep the race. It's almost a win-at-all-costs measures. Why is that never spoken about or thought of, or is it? I don't know.
Well, these are the people that make the rules and enforce them. Would you like to pick that up, Ian?
I think the most common approach would be that the jockey has broke the rule himself and deserves to be punished. But why do you punish the trainer, the owner of the horse, and the people that supported that horse?
But that's
the rationale behind it. You're punishing people who are innocent. Not the person who's guilty and broke the rule deserves it. But should you also punish the trainer, the owner and the people who supported that horse. That's the query.
But then, as Xavier just said, that he's been told, or he's been instructed at times to not care about that almost.
Yeah, but what about the poor people who supported that horse? Should they lose their money and they've done nothing wrong?
No, they shouldn't. We're talking gambling-wise.
Well, that's what will happen if you disqualify the horse, won't it?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not saying it should be. It's not necessarily an opinion
But
I
that's
agree
the
with.
question everyone asks.
Yeah.
Are you punishing innocent people?
Well, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, and that goes back to the point that the gentleman made here about the educating the trainers, and it's not, there is more than just the jockey involved. Marie-Ange is on her feet. Do you have a microphone, Marie-Ange?
Oui, je voudrais dire quelque chose. Je suis très très contente quand j'entends Hichem parler comme il parle. Il a pris de l'assurance. Et quand on va chez vous, on voit comment vous menez vos hippodromes, comment vous donnez de l'aide aux éleveurs. Je dis toujours les éleveurs, les propriétaires aussi. Et je veux te dire, à vous tous, la Sorek, bravo, bravo, bravo. Mais maintenant, je vais vous donner un scoop. Oui, en Algérie, interdit de frapper, il y a une interdiction pour les 3 ans. On ne frappe pas à partir de 4 ans, oui. Sans ça, il y a une interdiction. On ne lève pas la cravache. Alors, eh bien, comme bon lui semble, le cheval, et il fait son petit travail. Et à 4 ans, il sera prêt. Et moi, c'est vrai, nous les éleveurs, on est pressés de vendre. On est pressés, on les met à 3 ans. Mais c'est pas vrai. Le cheval, il sera prêt qu'à 4 ans. À 4 ans, on peut dire, ce cheval, il est prêt pour aller courir, pour faire sa petite vie dans les courses. Voilà.
Hisham, can you summarize and pick up on that for me, because we didn't get English translation.
Channel 4.
It should have been on channel. It switched. It was channel 5.
They changed it.
Okay. Can you pick up on Marie-Ange's point? Do you have a comment?
I think that's very interesting. I am really moved. I know she's very excellent, Marie-Ange. I've known you for years, and one of the best in France and in Algeria. So thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. You are very kind, and on behalf of the owners and on behalf of the breeders, we thank you.
For a fortune. I think we've got another question from this gentleman.
My name is Satya, and this question is to the Armenian gentleman on legal issues. You are referring to the race in November, the big race, and you are suggesting that if needed, the decision should be taken outside the commission. Now, there's already been a problem because, say, for example, it's interference, and the stewards, you might not have a jockey among the stewards. And I remember Ziani brought out this point 2 years back. Someone who's not ridden a horse cannot understand how that interference took place, whether it was his fault or the horse's fault or the other horse's fault. So already the stewards are not equipped enough to handle something of a fault by a jockey. And still they abide by that. Now what you're saying is now take it even outside to another panel, and in case you don't have such experts, will justice be done? You know, how is this going to be handled?
Thank you for your question, but I think I need to clarify my position because probably it was maybe misunderstood. I did not say to take out the case outside the or put it directly into an outside forum. What I said is you need to give the right to every person. These are the principle of justice. These are worldwide justice principles. You have to give the right to someone to have different levels of justice, okay? Now, when the case is studied by stewards, we know that the stewards, with all my due respect to all the stewards, they are on the ground, they are keen to apply the regulations. Sometimes they could zeal, so they could over apply the regulations, and they can create a situation of injustice. Now, that situation of injustice needs to be appealed. Now, in most racing authorities, the appeal is a body which is created within that racing authorities, where, logically speaking, you cannot be the judge and you cannot be the enforcer of the regulation in the same time. Well, we can go with it. We agree with this level of appeal. But what I am saying is that when you exhaust all your channels internally within your own house, then go to a third party. Now, coming back to your comment on sometimes the stewards themselves, they don't understand the regulations and they haste into taking the decision. How can we guarantee that when it goes to a third party, that third party would have the expertise? Now, I will go back, and I don't want to be seen as promoting the Court of Arbitration for Sports, but the Court of Arbitration for Sports is an organization that's been existing since 1983, and it's been handling cases related to sports litigation in most disciplines. We talk about athletics, we talk about football, we talk about basketball, we talk about swimming, we talk about doping in general. They are experts. The panels that you have in the Court of Arbitration for Sports, the arbitrators, which I'm one of them, these people are experts because they've been into this industry for a long time and they have gone through all the regulations and they have gone through all the rules. So if you take statistically within the Court of Arbitration for Sports, how many equestrian-related litigations are there, it's a huge amount and people will learn from it. And when you set a precedent at a higher court, normally everybody will follow. So that will give the parties that are fighting, that will give them a certain guarantee for independence. And this is what I am saying, okay? I'm not saying taking it totally outside the environment. No, it will have to be dealt within the environment. It will have the first degree and it will have the second degree, but the third degree, which is the final degree of litigation, it should be, you should give them the right to go to an independent party. Otherwise, you'll be creating a lot of injustice, and I can give you a lot of examples where there has been injustice, okay? And I think what Marcel mentioned, and this is brilliant in terms of what the Belgian system have. They have their own first degree, the second degree, and then if they're not satisfied, they can go to the civil court. The civil courts are people who are trained, they know the law, and at the end of the day, whether you understand the sport or no, it will not really give a lot when you talk about legal matters.
And by that time, communication has broken down within that forum of the sport anyway, once it gets to legal. And it might have been me that misled, because I was the one that I did use the phrase about taking it out of the steward's room and putting it in the courtroom. I think we've got time for two more questions. One, you could check. Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question for Ian on the comment you just made about innocent people. When a jockey rides a great race, and then at the end of the race, they take a sample from the horse, and it turns out the trainer has given him something. He gets disqualified. Aren't the owner and the jockey here innocent people as well?
Yes, they are. But in relation to the paying public, they've already had their winnings paid or whatever. In relation to the owner of the horse, he deserves to be punished because his horse hasn't raced on a level playing field, has it?
Correct. And the same thing it goes for when the jockey gives this extra whip. I'm not a jockey, I don't know how they keep track of the numbers, but when he's at the last furlong and he feels that he has a chance to win, he won't care about the number. He will just take the gamble and hit these two more.
I think he does care about the number, because otherwise there'd be 100 jockeys every day punished, and that's not the fact.
But the punishment...
Ask the jockeys, they don't.
Yeah, but the punishment is financial.
Regularly.
Well, in fact, there is a jockey with a microphone in his hand, Xavier Ziani, yes, and so we can ask the jockey.
Well, and I think Richie could answer as well. Look, whenever we are in the straight and we know we have chance to win the race, we are going to do our best. And if I have to break the rules to win, I may do it, because I'll be pushing my horse and trying to ride my horse the best to win. And I will not count how many whips I gave already before. But as long as you use the whip to go forward and to try to win the race, I think the rules are to be a bit more flexible. But again, rules are rules. I agree with you, sir. But what you don't have to forget, if you drive your car and on the highway and the speed limit is 120, if you pass over 120, it's your responsibility, because you are on a machine. It's a car. It's not something with blame under you. When I'm riding a horse and I'm whipping him and he hangs and I get blame of careless riding, it's not only my decision. Maybe the horse starts to get tired and he hangs by himself. So what I want to say is rules are rules. We all have to respect the rules. But sometimes, and that's why 2 years ago I mentioned, like, I believe everywhere in the world should have an ex-jockey in the steward room as a steward to have his opinion as a rider and to complete the decision of the steward. And I hope this will come in the future.
Just in relation
really
to
good
that,
point.
Xavier and Richard Mullen, we've worked together in Mauritius and Qatar. Mauritius and Qatar, I would say that from my point of view, you've been treated fairly.
Definitely, sir.
Definitely, thank you for that.
No, but
if a percentage has to be given the jockey's way, I think we do. I think most of the stewards in the world have an understanding of the difficulties you face and take that into account.
Yes.
And
yes.
I appreciate the fact that you said you've been treated fairly.
That's what we have the right to appeal as well, if we not agree with you.
Yes.
The only last thing I would like to mention, I believe, and I would like to ask the panel what they think about that. In some countries, if I get suspended, for example, on Saturday, and there is a big meeting with a group ones coming in the next week or 10 days, and I get suspended and I cannot ride the race. I believe it should be an international rules, like you can defer your suspension to the day after.
And that
And I would
applies
like
in a
to
lot
know-
of countries, doesn't it?
Sorry?
That applies in a lot of countries already.
That does apply in the UK at the moment as well.
In Cyprus, it's 9 days.
No. If the suspension is 2 days. Sorry, if the suspension is 2 days, 1 or 2 days you can defer it. If it's higher, you can't. If it's a Group 1 race.
Yes, and it'll depend on the rule you've been charged with, naturally.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I believe it should be an international rules for that case. And I would like to know what the panel think about that.
In Cyprus, where I'm working at the moment, it's now 9 days. 9 days deferment.
Deferred.
Yes, in Mauritius, when we were both there, if the suspension fall on a Group 1 day, you suspended it till after the Group 1 day.
Well, in UAE it's not the case because it's happened to me.
Oh,
And so
yes.
that's why I'm talking about my story. But I think it should be an international rules, like saying like, look, if there is any groups coming and you are meant to ride the group, you should defer the suspension. Because believe me, if you are watching sometimes races when we ride, I'm a jockey. If, like for example, when the World Cup's coming and the 3 meetings before the World Cup, look at the jockeys, the way they ride, and look at the way they ride on during the season. It'll be different because we know we have to be careful. We don't want to get punished on the World Cup night. And this makes problem with the trainers as well because they know also that. Like we won't give our best. I mean, we give our best, but we won't take the same risk than we are taking usually.
And also from the public's point of view, from the racing fans' point of view, Xavier, what we want to see is we want to see the best jockeys in the best races. So, do the panel, any of the panel, like to pick up on that quickly? We've got a couple of minutes. Marcel.
In Belgium and I think in France also we have the system of a joker. One time in the year you can suspend your suspension, but that's only once a year.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's why I mentioned that, and I think it should be international.
I think most people agree with you.
Yeah. I don't know how we can go like further in this story to make it an international rules everywhere in the world, but I think for the jockeys, for the owners, for the trainers, for all of us, it'll be good.
How could that work, Neil?
I think if we're going to get that done, you're going to have to go through the thoroughbred body first to get them on side, because in a lot of jurisdictions we rely on the thoroughbred. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it should be, but I think the way to get it done is to talk to people like Louis Romanet and say, "Come on, let's see if we can't get this done."
Yeah, that's why we have to thanks again His Highness Sheikh Mansoor to organize this kind of conference where we can talk and have a chat and explain our cases and story in our business. So thanks again to His Highness.
Thank you, Xavier, and thank you. I think I'm getting a nod from Tomo, who's got the microphone in his hand.
Superb session, by the way. Absolutely.
Terrific. Could we just have a big round of applause for the panel?
Absolutely.
We could go on a lot longer.
Can I just say, that was absolutely wonderful, guys. That was absolutely fascinating. So thank you all very, very much. Can we give them another big round of applause? That was great. Well done. Well, guys, come and have your photo. All right, to remind you, take home, put it on the sideboard. We're live here tomorrow at 10:30, so do try and join us about 10 o'clock and get mic'd up and all that sort of stuff. We now have the official photo. The evening is yours. Relax and enjoy Madrid. And don't forget, we're live here tomorrow. And our thanks to Sheikh Mansoor for this incredible festival in the 100th year of His Highness Sheikh Zayed. Stay with us.
Come in with...
Guys, well done. That was superb.